Okay, Jordan, good to finally get a chance to do a recorded conversation. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me, DJ.
Yeah,
I'm
salamat
doing good.
siang, at least in Boston.
Selamat sore here from Barcelona. Yeah.
Um, okay, so we first got in touch because you had written about sabbaticals on LinkedIn, and then we found out that we had a lot of folks and kind of stories in common. But help us just kind of like a brief overview of like how you got to where you are on taking time off in your career, and then we'll dive into the sabbatical itself.
Yeah. Um, well, I did my sabbatical during the pandemic, so it was very timely as well at that time. Like
Yeah,
the world is at pause and in halt. And at that time, I was on the middle of my healing journey as well. And I openly wrote about this in my LinkedIn as well about the power of psychedelics.
yeah,
I just started my psychedelics therapy, and I just discovered a lot of stuff that I need to work on. And I couldn't function for like a month at work. So I even already did 1 month sabbatical from work. At my company, they were generous to give me that time off for 1 month. And then when the COVID happened, and then my work also was going through just like a peak of demand, because at that time I was transitioning to a different role, and I
yeah.
was doing organizational coaching, and I was coaching a lot, and I almost burned out. And then I was like, okay, I don't want to repeat this. And I can feel the toll in my body. Like I just felt like I'm super tired. And then the company also was going through a layoff, and I was lucky enough to be informed about that decisions, not knowing that like they're going to be a layoff, and my role will probably be terminated as well in the next 6 months. And I
Oh,
chose to different route. Instead of finding a different role in the company, I chose to terminate my own role and then say, okay, you know what, I'll be done, and I'll wrap up my role in the next 6 months. And I choose to do a sabbatical. It was really scary to do that because it was September 2020, and it's really at the middle of pandemic, like that early days of the alpha variant. There's no
yeah.
vaccines yet, and yeah, and I just chose to jump into the world of unknown and uncertainty to really take care of my body, take care of my mind, take care of my soul, and
So
move to
you were,
Bali.
yeah, so you were feeling burnt out. You took kind of like a short leave with the company, and then when you got the opportunity to kind of take off instead of, potentially being let go, you just decided to go for it. So that gave you the having done so for a short amount of time gave you the permission, or did you just realize that you had to take off and so the first chance you got a chance to do it?
I think it's accumulation, right? I think for for many overachievers like me, like I'm a recovering overachievers, and I'm trying to be just an high achievers, not an over hyper one. To take a month off is already really scary. Like it's a threat to my identity,
Yeah.
and to feel that I could do that for a month felt liberating and felt encouraging. And I kind of have that already, like a taste. I'm like, okay. And after that 1 month off, like I was allowed to explore different things at the company, and I did try to launch a product, and it's a different product because I launched a different product earlier, and then we have to kill the product, and then I launch another product, and we have to kill it before even launch. So there is that accumulation of heartbreak as well about my own baby being killed in the company.
Mm,
Um, and that gave me permission of like, okay, like, is this really what I want to do? Like, why did it keep, like not aligning in the bigger picture of the company and my own desire and ambition? And I needed like a blank space and a blank slate as well to really restart and figure out like what is it that I really want to do. And I remember my therapist at that time told me like, Jordan, you cannot figure out the next step if you don't clean the table full slate. Like it's too crowded, and it's just too chaotic to figure something out in the middle of
yeah.
chaos, right? It's just scattered with a lot of different things, and I don't make space for it. Like energetically, my mind is already all over the place, so I need to give myself permission to do that.
Yeah, I feel like the analogy I think of is going to the grocery store while you're hungry, right? Like you're not going to make good decisions if you're you're trying
Yes,
to figure out what you do
exactly.
next and you're super stressed out. Um,
Right, right. Or like imagine you're being so full and then you have to think about what food to cook next. Like
yeah.
you don't want to cook anything. You don't want to cook anything, right? Well, there is no food even crossing your mind.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
that's a much better analysis analogy.
yeah.
And so I like the delineation between a high achiever and an overachiever. So tell us why, because I think you're a pretty non-traditional kind of story as far as getting into psychedelics and coaching and therapy from a
Mhm.
background of an MBA. So tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
like this achieving mindset, where it came from, and what it looked like in that first part of your life.
right. Okay, I'm gonna enter this quite controversial territory of postulating about most backgrounds of MBA people.
Yeah.
I personally feel, and I still feel, most of MBA, like especially like top tier MBA students, have some kind of core wounds that they
Mm,
carry from childhood or from society or from upbringing that they somehow need to prove themselves, right?
yeah.
And then most competitive industries like consulting, iBanking, startups, and PE and VCs, and like top business schools that are becoming the pipeline of that kind of production of people thrive on that insecurities of core wounds, right? That we're not good enough. And this is why a lot of imposter syndrome come up. I mean, you teach at HBS, a lot of maybe first year students also feel imposter syndrome, like all these core wounds that like we're not good enough.
Yeah.
And then this overachievement symptoms thrive on that. It's feeding off of that core wounds, right? That we're not good enough.
Yep.
There's
That
like
like
in
in
deep
the insecure overachiever profile of
insecure
McKinsey
overachiever
consultants.
profile.
Yeah.
Yeah, McKinsey consultants or
Yeah.
BCG or Bain, whatever, right? Like they thrive in that symptoms. Like they really actually, to some extent, arguably, like exploit that tendency. So people keep achieving and achieving even more. They squeeze that insecurity, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. There could be some ethical discussions about that. Um, so mine was definitely from my childhood, like, and then my upbringing, and I think also genetically from my father. My father is also himself a very workaholic man,
Yeah.
so I definitely had the discussion with him about this inability to pause and to be content with what is and what I have, and to keep wanting to have more and more. It comes from the place of scarcity. Like
Yeah.
he grew up poor, and I grew up not. I grew up middle class, but I also experienced like a lack of money when I was growing up. My dad only started making money when I was teenager, right? So there
You
is
grew up
that
in
in
Jakarta.
Indonesia, in Jakarta, yeah. And he has 10 siblings, and my mom has 5 or 8, no, 8 siblings. 3 of them died, so it's 5 of them. So I grew
Wow.
up with all this like scarcity mindset of like, if I don't work and if I don't study enough, like I will not have money and I will not live, right? So there is a core belief installed in my brain. Now there is other brain of this other programming in my brain telling me that like if um, I don't achieve, I don't get the validation that I get from my parents. I'm also a middle
Yeah.
child, so I don't know if you heard of middle child syndrome. That we kind of we sort of like always get left behind and we get neglected. And
Yeah.
my way of achieving that validations or acceptance of love is to assert myself by being these hyperachievers, right? Because that's the only way I could get attention. I have 3 siblings.
Yeah.
Like I compete for attention through that. Like I get attention from my achievements. Um, and then I also grew up closeted. Like for 30 years, I was in the closet. Like I'm LGBT, I'm a queer man, and then not until I was 30, so you can call myself as a late bloomer, I came out. Like
Yeah.
so, there is that burden, that hidden cost of emotions that I need to be smart, be high achieving, so I can be respected, just in case or less people disrespect me for being an LGBT person,
Yeah.
right? So that combination of wanting validation from my parents, being put in pedestal for like being a smart student, and then the scare of poverty, and then the scare of being disrespected as a gay man growing up in a very conservative Muslim country,
Yeah.
just became this triple whammy of me wanting to always achieve, right? So of course, no matter how logically I can take that logic that I should rest and not overachieve, I couldn't. My body just keep not feeling safe to settle, to not work, right? Or to just be in high achievers. Now let me draw the distinction between that overachievers. So that I become overachievers, right? So nervous system wise, I'm always in the sympathetic nervous system, like fight and flight.
Yep.
I could never switch to my parasympathetic to like rest and digest. And there is this um, theory that, I mean, I'm a breath worker, so I'm also trained in nervous system awareness. When you keep pedaling a gas pedal in your nervous system, which is sympathetic, 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 you have to pull in the handbrake pedal off dorsal shutdown. So I shut down.
Yeah.
Instead of like being able to navigate that with like a gears with ventral, which is like parasympathetic. So parasympathetic has two branches, ventral and dorsal. I just immediately put the dorsal, and then like a car, I just skid, like I just burn out, right? So before I
Yeah.
burn out, I already like put that brake, and then like like that, right? I swirl around as a car. Now, the goal is not to be able to, not to become overachievers. Then you have to always pull the brake again, right? You want to be able to navigate that between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, between sympathetic and the ventral vagal nerve of the nervous system. So then you can become high achievers. You can do a lot, and then you can just downregulate. You
Mm.
downshift into your parasympathetic nervous system, so you rest, you recharge, and then you perform again, and then you rest. So you're sustainable. You never have to pull that dorsal handbrake again, and like burn out, and then cost a lot of time of being like taking sabbatical for 1 year or 2 years. In essence, what I did, I took 1 year full sabbatical and then another year half sabbatical, because I personally felt like I finished my sabbatical last year.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Like there's a lot there that I want to go into. So first of all, what you're proposing is that, because this is a question that I get almost all the time, which is like, is there any way to get all the benefits from a sabbatical, but just in less amount of time?
Mhm.
And I feel like I'm pretty strict on everyone who's taken a sabbatical has taken a vacation, but they're saying it
Mhm.
does something profoundly different. And so I believe that there's something important around the duration of time that can help unlock, right? And so you're talking about kind of like downshifting, sympathetic, parasympathetic. But
Yeah.
what you're also saying is that once you've accessed that, then you kind of build the muscle to be able to access that more kind of calm mindset, like
Yes.
more accessibly, as opposed to needing to take a sabbatical to feel better
Right.
each time.
Yes.
So it's like you're training a muscle to be able to take a break that you don't
Right.
have in advance. Yeah.
Right. So can I ask you what the question is? The question is, how do we access the benefit
Yeah.
of the sabbatical in a short amount of
That's
time? Or
that's the question that I normally get, right? And so I think what I'm learning from you right now is that like once you've developed that skill set, then you can access it more readily.
uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
until you kind of develop that skill set to be able to drop down into that other level that is
Yeah.
not how you were kind of raised, not how you existed, it's very
Mm-hmm.
difficult to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my answer is yes and no to short sabbatical, right? It really depends on the emotional debt and
Yeah.
exhaustion debt that you have accumulated in your body
Yeah.
to determine how long the sabbatical should be. Like for me, I've been functioning like that for like 30 years. Since I was
Yeah.
like, I literally, I remember I was really a high achieving child as when I was 3, because that's how I get my attention from my parents. Like
Yeah.
I was already multiplying and dividing when I was 3. I was like, how on earth like a 3-year-old can multiply, you know? Um, and that was becoming like my default nervous system. So I was already in high tone sympathetic for so long, and then I got a chance to like downshift that to parasympathetic, to rest and rest and rest. Like I literally felt when I did my psychedelic, the message that I received in Bali, that like the only task you have to do this year in this land is to rest. That's it.
Yeah.
Rest and rest and rest. Like that's it. Like, and that was really hard. I don't know how to rest, right?
Yeah.
And I think what happened during sabbatical is that your body, because you're relaxing, you're on vacation, you're exploring something that really excites you, not really like a cognitively challenging responsibility or task, is that you allow your body to naturally shift to that parasympathetic. So you unwire that rewiring that has been wired and then sort of convoluted for a while to be, like untie the knot, to like straighten the knot again, and then be ready to sort of start performing again. So that depends on how much accumulation and toll of exhaustion and debt you have already carried over in your life.
Yeah.
So the long answer is that to that question. Like I don't think No, it's not. I don't think. I think short sabbatical could be possible depending on how much you want to unwire in that sabbatical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I also think about it as if you're coming into sabbatical from a very low place, right? If you're coming in from like acute trauma from work or relationship or, health crisis, either your own
Health.
or
Yeah.
someone else's, then it's going to take a lot longer to unwind that. Whereas if a
Yeah.
company has a sabbatical policy and everything's kind of going okay, and you don't have to take any career risk or anything to take that sabbatical, then it can be a lot easier to drop into like a different way of living. But I think what
Yes.
what you're talking about, and this is certainly my experience, is that if it's the first time you've ever addressed a lot of this trauma, it's the first time you've had a break in decades. It's gonna be pretty tough to drop into that state.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even right now, as I'm already starting my own business, like I already think like I'm gonna take 1 month off from this 6 months engagement with my clients. Like I think I need this
Yeah,
1 month off because I was like working and working for 6 months, even though still incorporate rest in the middle, but just like just a dedicated time to not to focus on anything, like dedicated time off on just like non-agenda, like there is that part of a conference unconference. To have that in your
mm,
year could be super
yeah,
beneficial, right? And I think that's how I want to live my life as well
yeah.
moving forward.
So okay, so you ended up kind of taking two sabbaticals or two very different parts of a sabbatical. The first one
Yeah,
was more healing, and the second part was it living into
more
your
yeah,
yeah.
restoring, like really restoring my life.
Yeah, so tell me about those different sections and what you did in each of them.
So the 1 month sabbatical that I did is to really focus on doing a lot of therapy,
Yeah.
um, because that was right after I came back from my psychedelic retreat, and I uncover a lot of shits, basically a lot of dark stuff that I never processed. And what I found myself after that, I just cried every day at work. Like I never cried so much in my life in that 6 months
Yeah.
period, and I had to take that 1 month off. And also growing up in like a very patriarchal, like toxic masculinity culture when men repress their emotions, like even though
Yep.
gay men are usually tend to be more sensitive, like I just suppress. Like I suddenly felt very sensitive and vulnerable and raw, and then like have that permission somehow to process my emotions. So that 1 month is like very team oriented, goal oriented. Like I need to stop this intensity of emotions of
Yeah.
sprawling out, right? And the other one, which is the long term one, is really just undetermined. Like it's just like undefined, right? Just go to just do nothing and explore things that really excite me, to really rediscover what really lights me up, right?
Yeah.
In that 1 month from work, I know I have a goal to restore my body, restore my vitality and my productivity, because I need to show up back again in 1 month and then do the work, right? Which is
Yeah.
beneficial to both sides. But for the undedicated one, is like it's a unpaid time off, right?
Mhm.
Um, I didn't receive any salary. I just used my savings to really do that 1 year full sabbatical. And I did explore many things, like on my art side, and also I continuously heal. Like I pick up new skills. Now become like foundation of my work. I resuscitated old relationships, right? That give me meanings. I moved to a new country twice. I travel a little bit too, and that gave me a renewed sense of hope and faith in how I wanna, you know, um, I guess optimize my talents, right?
Yeah.
And then really fully align with my authenticity in terms of like what really lights me up in life. And I think there is a phrase I remember, like what the world needs is not successful people, but more people who feel alive. Like I
Yeah.
feel alive every day. I think because thanks to this self permission to really not do anything for 2 years after like doing a lot of things for 30 years, right? Um, yeah.
Um, how did you decide to do those different things? So how did you decide to, lean more into your artistic side? Like, you have a year. Did you plan anything out, or was it more kind of following your curiosities over the course of the time?
No, I didn't plan anything at all. And that was another sort of identity shift. Like I used to be a planner. In 1 year,
Yeah.
I'll do this. In 2 years, like just overachievers, right? Like we have our like Gantt chart even like uh, I tried to do it, and then my therapist told me, Jordan, you even apply your overachieving mindset to your healing. You
Of
can't
course.
heal fast. Like I was like, how like I was like complaining to her. I'm like, why am I still like suffering from this emotion? Like why am I still triggered by this? I'm like, well, because it's not a linear process, right? So
Yeah.
it's the same thing with my sabbatical. Like I just pick up whatever I wanted. Like I remember I was learning surfing, I was learning guitar, I was learning calisthenics, I was learning Spanish. And people say, "Oh, dude, like you even make it even more ambitious by learning different skills." No, no, no. This give me joy. Like I really feel like I like learning these things, and I hang out with my friends. I dance a lot. I know like I love dancing, but I never really allow myself to pursue that like more sort of like frequently. Like I dance
Yeah.
every week, sometimes once or twice a week. Um, and then yeah, I learned guitar. I learned this surfing, and then I pick up new skills like in calisthenics. And then I learned breath work, which is like these new modalities that I employ into my coaching, into my modalities to help my clients. And that just came really naturally, and sometimes by invitations or organically, or like people show me like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I just, like follow that. Like I think this is the concept of flow as well. And I allow
Yeah.
myself not to have a plan, and that permission not to follow a plan was a huge, refreshing sort of like redefinition of my identity, because I used to be so rigid about this, and I'm like, no, 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 this is not aligned with my goal and my, I don't know, template or like my manifesto.
Yeah.
But that gave me a different sense of liberation and also joy and pleasure, right? And surprisingly, it gave me new skills. So
So what gave you permission? I want to dig into that because I had the same experience. I feel like people have this, but can you put your finger on what gave you permission to change? What gave you permission to explore?
what gave me permission to explore? I think the absence of supervision at work, right? Absence
Yeah.
of peering eyes about my life, because when you do this while you're working, you'll be like, your boss will be asking you, where have you been? Like there could be some judgment about that, or like, what do you do this weekend, right? And that tied to the need for money, right? Like the need to earn money every month, or the need to be accountable to some kind of responsibility. Sort of the lack of that, or the absence of that, freed me, or like give me that permission to just really explore. And I think there is this other part of me that I was like giving myself like, okay, I'm gonna give myself a 1 year off. So I already saved enough money to sort of live off without working for a year. And that gave me, okay, I can do whatever I want. I have this
Yeah.
means and resources to keep to staying alive, basically, right? To live comfortably while exploring this thing. So, and I think there is the element of not having to do this as a profession, like, or not having to perform,
Mm,
right? Not having to prove myself anymore. I also think that coupled with my therapy, like, how do I build self-esteem without the need for external validations? Give me that permission as well. Like, like if I fail at this, if I suck at this, it's fine. Like I'm still worthy and I'm still whole.
yeah.
I think that gave me that kind of backup of confidence as well. And this sort of stir like a very strong source and fountain of self-esteem, that I'm not defined by what I pursue, what my hobbies are, right? And that gave me a sense of freedom of like, okay, if I can decouple myself from the identity of my job title and my education or my MBA, like I can do this thing with my hobbies or interests that I
Yeah.
probably suck at.
And were you in Bali the whole time or most of the time?
That 1 year, yes, I was in Bali because it was also like travel border closures, right?
Ah,
And then the
yeah.
following year, I was already working in the afternoon, and I was learning Spanish in the morning and exploring flamenco dance in the afternoon as well. So that was when I was in Spain already.
Yeah.
Like I took 1 year to live in Malaga.
Do you think it's important to be out of the geographic space that you're from? Like, is it important to travel somewhere
Uh,
else?
Good questions. I don't know that. Um, it definitely felt very refreshing and um, destigmatizing, because I was
Yeah.
also living in Singapore, like people in Singapore are working
Yeah.
so hard. And if I was just a hobo there, I just felt so ashamed.
Yeah.
I think there is that collective cultural permission as well to explore yourself, to like get you, like Bali is known for that kind of um reputation as well, right? Like people who
Yeah.
like finding themselves. Um Even when I was in Malaga, like I think helping, like having another one job as well already there, like having this like part-time job in the afternoon helped me as well. Felt I'm not really lost, because like
Yeah.
I completely uprooted myself to a different geographic location where I never been before. Um, but in general, I would want to hypothesize it might be quite necessary to uproot yourself from one location,
Yeah.
especially if you can afford it, right?
Yeah. So a couple other questions. I mean, first, was the part-time job, were you doing part-time coaching?
Yeah, I was doing part-time coaching.
Okay. So like that aspect of you're able to bring some money in, but also it gave you
Mm,
some like rooting, so you had something to return to, and then it felt like the
yeah,
time away from that was away.
right. Was not that lost. Like I found a new professional interest that I could develop into, that I could craft that,
Yeah.
right? That I could hone it in that craftsmanship into something that, give me some kind of stability as well.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, I remember Tim Ferriss talked about like doing like while he's writing a book, like doing weightlifting because like you write and it doesn't feel like you make any progress, and sometimes you actually don't make any progress, but having something in your life where you can say like I'm getting a little bit better.
Hmm.
For me it'd be climbing, right? You can like see your progress along something when
Right,
another part of your life is very like doesn't feel like you're making progress, just to give
right,
yourself some small wins.
right. No, absolutely. I believe that because I think for most humans, we all want growth, right? We want challenges. We want not necessarily like hard challenges, like we want things that are different, right?
Yeah.
Because especially for someone, now there's that humans in general, and there's also a segment of human like us who are like recovering overachievers who like
Yeah.
cannot function in life without some kind of like challenges, right? Or some kind of like progress in something, as you said. And I think redefining that outside of work, like weightlifting, climbing. And for me at that time, I was like learning Spanish.
Yeah.
And then I have some kind of job that is rooting, like part-time job of coaching that rooted me into some kind of financial stability, gave me that more freedom to like explore further, right?
Yeah.
And it has served me really well, actually, to be honest. Like I'm really content. And when you ask me how I'm doing, I'm really content because I'm so glad I did that. Without which I would not be where I am today.
Yeah.
And I hope more people can be, like empowered and encouraged, maybe hopefully inspired to do the same.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned learning Spanish because so when I talk to folks, I think who are overachievers, I think they want to take, they feel this big gap and this big loss from all the work and all the thing that they're focusing on. So they want to like swap it out for something else that's like accomplishment focused. And a lot of
Mhm.
people are like, well, I'll like learn a new language. And, my initial reaction is like, don't swap something intellectual out for something intellectual. Like at least give yourself a chance to like get
Mm.
out of your brain for a little while. And it sounds like you were like surfing, doing like dancing, like doing body work as
Yeah,
well.
body work. Yes,
And then
yes.
like maybe went into the language learning. But also if you're living in Spain, it's a little bit different than just like sitting in front of Duolingo or something.
Right, right. And I was literally also learning flamenco in the afternoon. So
Yeah.
so there is that body base as well. And I think you brought an interesting point there about like swapping something, right? Like I think I would argue like I was not swapping intellectual challenges.
Yeah.
I was just feeling in my soul and my brain, sorry, no, not my brain, my soul and my emotional desire
Yeah.
to pursue something that light me up, right?
Mhm.
Before my intellectual pursuit or like my intellectual exercise has been driven by external validation, some kind of like benchmarking by society standards of
Yeah.
professional and academic success. But right now I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
Like I just want to learn this and I want to be good at it because I love how I speak it, I love how I show up and how I'm being perceived by people when I being able to do this, to
Yeah.
perform this, right? And then it's like a more anchored, aligned internal validations.
Yeah.
Because I remember like my first language learning is English because I had to survive. Like if you want to succeed in the world, you have to speak English. So it's out of necessity. And then I learned Chinese because Indonesia is like, gonna be between the East and West, and China is gonna be a global power. I learned
Yep.
Chinese. And then I learned Arabic because I want to learn about my religion. And none of that is really about my passion, you know?
Yeah.
But then I learned Spanish because I wanted to, because I want to and I get to. I think the difference is that there is this shifting from I need to and I can to I want to and I get to and I can,
Yeah.
right? And I don't want to keep doing I need to, and I
Yeah.
should.
Yeah.
I can until I hit the wall and I say I cannot, right? So I just want to keep doing like I want to and I get to and I can and I can. And then when I'm tired, I stop and then I come
Yeah.
back at it again. Yeah.
No, I love that. I love you said it once, but I think about it as like the shoulds, right?
Yeah.
Feeling
Yeah.
like you're obligated, like you should do something versus you want to
Right.
or you get to. Um,
Right.
I want to just return quickly to Bali because I think so. I worked in Jakarta. I spent some time in Bali, and I think especially for Americans and especially for like straight male like people all over
Mhm.
the place, like when you think of Bali, you think of Eat, Pray, Love. And so it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's that like, gooey, corny story. Like, I can't identify with that. And my experience in Bali was even though, like the whole world knows about it because of stories like that, that it still is like a very special place. Like it's a
Mhm.
place to me, I was living in Canggu where like, you're
Mhm.
surrounded by all these people who are like, "I wanted to be a baker, but I couldn't afford a bakery in France, so I, like, am gonna do it in Bali." And, like, folks are kind of
Mhm.
living out their dreams, either, like, longer term,
Mhm.
they've moved there, or just for a period of time. So,
Mhm.
do you feel like there's like, how would you describe, like, the special nature of Bali to folks that haven't been there? Or feel free to
Yeah,
disagree.
it's funny. It's funny you asked that. Like you're like the maybe fifth person this year or like the past 6 months asking me they wanted to move to Bali to do their
Yeah,
vacation or like their sabbaticals. So okay, I'll be biased and I'll be brutally honest because I'm Indonesian myself. I think there is an over exotification of Bali as an island to white people, to Westerners. Like I wouldn't
totally.
say white people, but like I just to say to people who are able to afford certain living standards in Bali, right?
Yep.
And I get to come from that background because I get to work in Singapore, have been Western educated, so I have a similar income, right? And I have a similar savings if I want to do the same, like these bakers to be people want moving to Bali.
Yeah.
Um, the reality is that like that is definitely true, right? But it's also not true for so many people who cannot afford if they
Totally.
don't come from the Western background or like Western nations and high growth economies like Singapore, Japan, like Hong Kong and
Yeah.
Europe and the US or Australia, even in New Zealand too, and Canada, right? All these G7 nations that give them that income. And that is the status, right? And at the same time, Bali has that reputation for a while before Julia Roberts and Elizabeth Gilbert
Yeah.
popularized Bali with their books and movies. It's been sort of that magical island or like island of gods that attracted so many lost souls, they call it, right?
Mm.
And I was kind of lost, to be honest, at that time. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm trying to discover myself. And the island itself is located in this tectonic plates of Indonesian, full of tectonic plates like in all the islands and volcanoes. And somehow there is a geographical or like I forgot like geological discovery about like the plates of where Bali Island sits somehow is connected to some kind of like um, high resonance mountain, similarly
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what happened in Hawaii with these mountains. And that gave this mystical and magical vibe because of that geographical location and geological conditions.
Yeah.
So it could be scientifically or geologically also speaking that people are attracted to that island because of that magnetism, right?
Yep.
It could be popular culture wise because it's been popularized by Gilbert and Julie Roberts, right? And it could be also from social media reinforcing that narrative and stereotype Bali as the place to find your souls, right?
Yeah.
Having said that, it doesn't invalidate that Bali did something huge for me. It definitely restored my confidence about the need for rest and the need for balance with nature and alignment with nature, because Bali is the only Hindu island in Indonesia,
Yeah.
and Hinduism in Bali is different from Hinduism in India and Hinduism around the world. And Balinese people have this sacred traditions that they really worship and respect and revere and venerate nature, right? So there's a lot of alignment with nature, and that put me into this reflective state that I am human being and I am human nature.
Yeah.
And for so long, I've been denaturalized from my nature, right? Just keep working, 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 and never rest. And Bali gave me that permission as well to rest.
So it's rest, it's nature, fill in your own place, find your own place that's maybe different from where you're at,
Right.
but has those kind of aspects to it. Where do
Right.
you
I
think?
mean, sorry to add, socially as well, you have a lot of similar people in the same boat, right? And
Yeah.
that gave you some kind of like feeling of belonging. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
wow, I'm not alone here for doing this kind of work.
Yeah. Back to that permission piece you talked about, where like you don't feel
Yes.
permission at work because you're supervised and people are judging you. But if you're surrounded by folks that are kind of in the same mindset, I mean, that's why when I do like sabbatical group kind of coaching or get-togethers, right? You have these folks that are on totally different journeys, different ages, different careers, but they
Right.
happen to be in a very vulnerable place that it could be around a lot of change, and it just like gives
Mhm.
people permission to really do what they wanted to do in the first place, what they knew they
Mhm.
needed to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
So okay, so you came out of like what happened when you were kind of coming out of this like sabbatical cocoon in Spain? Like how did you think about returning to work and life at that point?
I feel excited. Like I was like, I miss work. Like I was like, I finished that 1 year learning Spanish, and I just felt this is it. I'm ready to rumble again. And I felt my energy is full, and like my tank is full, and I'm ready. I'm feeling recharged,
Mm,
and I'm also feeling more secure with myself that I know what I want and I know what I'm good at, and I'll be super honest with people about what I want and what I want to and what I get to do and what I need as well. Like I suddenly know what my needs are, my boundaries, my strength, my talents, my capabilities, my blind spots. And I think without sabbaticals, I would not know that to do that kind of very holistic reflections. I mean, on top of also the fact that I was diligent with my therapy and then like coaching with like I actually access people's professional resources and services to help me go on that track, right? I
yeah,
don't want to repeat another long extended sabbatical for two years, like, but in retrospect, like compared to the 30 years, it's like nothing, right?
yeah,
It's like 2 out of 30. It's like 1 out of 15. Like, it's not much out of that 30 years. And by then I already like already entering my early 30s, and now in my mid 30s. And I think that's what I got. Like I got this renewed sense of self confidence and self esteem, and some kind of anchoring of internal validation that like I am enough and I'm worthy. And if I don't have a job immediately, like I'm fine. I survived 2 years without having a job. I mean, well, 1 year fully, but then I didn't have a part-time job, and that gave me also some kind of like renewed confidence to think about my finances. I
yeah,
mean, yeah, and to explore different career options, right? And I think that full autonomy and agency of a human being is a lot of people that really it's something that a lot of people probably would want to have, because a lot of people when they quit a job they move immediately to another job, right? Because they haven't really addressed the core wound, what really that makes you feel need to jump and jump and jump again, right? And sometimes not in a good terms.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think do you think you would have ended up in this job regardless? Like, did it accelerate something that would have happened later, or did it change your trajectory?
It changed so much. Like I remember in even the beginning of 6 months of my sabbatical, was already being recruited for 4 different executive job at tech
Mm.
startups. And I'm like, hey, are you sure? Like it's 4 months already. Like how long do you want to be in sabbatical? I literally was shamed for my sabbatical, you know?
Yeah,
And I was so tempted because I was like, oh, like, will I have money by the end of this 1 year? Like da 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 da. Like I had that doubt, right?
yeah,
But I know deep down there is this also like a deeper and stronger sense of intuitions that I said, no, 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 this is not for me. I don't think I can thrive back in the corporate world. Um, and yeah, and then when people ask me about coaching and then like how do you become a coach, executive coaching and all that, and they're like, I always answered, I didn't choose coaching. Coaching chose me. I literally
mm,
started this founders coaching because a founder friend reached out to me, and then suddenly that became a referral, and that became like an in-house coach job, and then
yeah,
I got referred again. And I never really have to market myself. Like I really just like let's set up a website and then put a LinkedIn profile, and then in like inbounds interest start happening. And to me, that's where true flow is. Like when you don't need to really hustle anymore, you feel fully aligned with what you were supposed to be doing. And
yeah,
granted, this is not the only thing I'll be doing. Like I'm also involved in other projects that I want to explore. And I think if we are to live long, like let's say 100 years, like I still have like 2/3 of my life that I haven't explored yet. And maybe I'll take another 1 year sabbatical, right? I don't know. So what I'm trying to say is that like it gave me this full freedom to be so assured with my intuition and my decisions that I don't need to feel pressured again, especially peer pressured by friends to come back to the old world that didn't really, you know, thrive well for me or like function optimally for me.
I want to go back to the money issue. So, like, how did it change your relationship to money? How do you think about the amount of money you need now versus
Mhm.
what you thought before? I'd love to just hear more about that.
Yeah. So money is a tricky thing, right? I remember, I think the other reasons why I moved to Bali is because it's cheaper than Singapore. Like it was like 10 times or five
Yeah.
times cheaper. I forgot. So I think I used my emergency saving account to live in Bali. I remember
Mm,
that. And and I remember immediately after 3 months, I already started having this fear of like, oh, I'm poor, I don't have money, but I still have some kind of like quite bountiful amount of savings, and I'm just creating this irrational fear I'll be like homeless and not having able to eat.
yeah.
And I brought it up to my therapist, and they're like, oh, you have money wounds. Like I thought I already have like emotional wounds, like all this like ego wounds. I still have money wounds, seriously, like. And that got me into this money mindset. Like I don't know if you rich dad poor dad and rich
Yeah.
kid poor kid, Robert Kiyosaki, right? Like rich people stay rich even though they're stupid, right?
Yeah.
And you can figure it out. Like pretty much, like most rich people that I know stay rich,
Yeah.
especially they're born into that kind of legacy. Why? Because they believe they deserve it. They believe they are rich and they believe they can do it. Most poor people stay poor, and only a handful of poor people made it to the rich because they powered through and they have
Yeah.
access to education and all, and they keep working hard. So there is an expense of that, right? To get out of poverty mindset to rich mindset. So what happened is that my therapist told me like you are not poor, but you still think you are poor. So there is
Yeah.
that cognitive dissonance. So I had to do this money therapy, like clearing my belief about money.
Hmm.
I remember I was like shaking, just charging 5 digits for like a 6 months job, like which is like a maybe 1 month salary in Singapore, but I'm struggling to even charge that to a client for 6 months. Like, can you imagine? Like, I used to be so comfortable receiving a big fat paycheck, and then in
Yeah.
6 months, and then in one go, I have to charge that same amount for 6 months work. I'm like trembling, right? I was like, holy shit, what's going on here? Like, there is that cognitive dissonance and then a gap of what I believe and what I think it should be. So I was clearing that money belief a lot with my therapist. And yeah, that I think combined with that confidence and self-esteem that I had, I suddenly have this renewed assurance that like I'm worth this much. If you don't want me, don't work with me. If you want
Yeah.
me, then pay this, right? And I think that sense of security also give people confidence that I can deliver the work that I do and I'm worth this much. A lot of people do like, competitive intelligence. They do like benchmarking. Yeah, of course I do that too. I do market analysis, how much I should be worth
Yeah.
in the market for the kind of service I do. But I also know how much worth that I never really internalized into the calculation when I negotiated salary before, right? Um, and that gave me into this um, power of like, okay, this is how much I'm worth. Now, when I'm talking about objectively conditioned, I'm compared to a lot of MBA graduates. I'm definitely not in the top bracket income earners.
Yeah.
But what do I gain out of that? I gain freedom, time, and health, and things to explore that I want to do. Like I work less, but I earn almost the same what I was earning. And I
Yeah.
felt like I'm on track. And I can do more because I have renewed my battery and then this tank that was empty before, and I could explore other avenues that I can expand my income capabilities as well, or
And
revenue capability, yeah, income earnings.
I don't know if you ever thought about this. Like, did you have a number that you felt like you should earn, and has that number changed? Or are you just like, I know
Mm,
what I need to make myself comfortable and
right,
right? So this notion of like, what am I worth? What do I charge? And then also like, what do I need to feel safe?
right. So I've done an exercise for sure because all of MBA, like we also were submerged into this like, oh, salary index, right? Like
Mm,
my friends, when I went through a 5 year reunion, we were like, oh, I'm making half a million or I'm making a million, but they were in private equity and they
yeah.
were so sick. Like they don't look good. I'm like, I don't want to earn that much and look like you. Like jokes aside, but that was the aha moment. I'm like, oh, at what expense do I
Yeah.
want to earn this much of money? And to be honest, like I'm not a big spender myself. I spend a lot of my money on my growth and my experiences and travel and food. I don't spend that much money anyway in a month. So I realized I actually only need this much and I'll be happy. I'll feel comfortable.
Mm,
Right. And there is this research, like I think by, I forgot, the New York Times, that there is a law of diminishing return when you earn $75,000 a year.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's incremental happiness of the incremental increase in your salary doesn't really add up. It will just actually, a lot of it will actually decline. But there is a counter research that recently got published that your wealth is highly linearly correlating with your well-being. So
Mm,
what does that mean? Your ability to make more informed decisions and more empowered decisions about money will increase as you also increase your wealth.
yeah.
So it's no longer tied to like money, a salary as a proxy of happiness, but wealth as a proxy of well-being.
Mm,
So that means it includes holistically your ability to give money, to help other people, to make foundations, to give charity, to, I don't know, feel secure or could create generational wealth for your children,
yeah.
right? So it's not very myopic way in a way that like, oh yeah, like I will not be happy. But is that really the only thing you want to achieve in life to be happy? Like I'm sure there's more than that. For me, I want to live a meaningful life. A meaningful life is beyond happiness,
Yeah.
and expanding my wealth will allow me to do that, right? So but the attitude that I employ since then is no longer like I have to hustle to get there. I just
Mm,
become more patient, that like I know my time will come. If I can manage, let's say, a 6 figure salary to the top, I can manage 7 figure salary, I can manage 8 figure salary. I don't want to jump immediately to like, oh, I want to manifest $1 billion. Like, and then even some billionaires who exited their company, they sometimes feel confused. They have identity crisis because
yeah.
they have this like shock therapy. Suddenly they have a lot of money, right? So I want to feel deserving of that money too. Because if I don't need that much money yet, like, do I want to have that money immediately? I mean, it would be great, but I think I will still need help. And some advisors, professional advisors, like, hey, what do I do with this excess like $1 million?
Yeah.
Of course, I have that like desire to earn like that much, and then be able to be more mindful, intentional about that use of that wealth. But I'm more patient now, and I believe I will be there, and I believe I will have more impact as well. But that
Yeah.
gives me a sense of freedom, a health and well-being that is not ruined by this desire to reach that very instantly and quickly, that sacrifice a lot of the things that I value so much in life.
Yeah. So it kind of like expanded your conception of like how to think about making money, gave you more patience as far as the timing of making money, and
Mhm.
probably impacted, like, gave you more confidence to make less money in general, but especially like less money now because of the trade-off of your health and your happiness.
Right, right, right. And I think this is a similar debate about like how do we want to see global growth, like we never taken into account people's mental health and then environmental health, climate change. If we calculate all of that, all of them, I think we should have a zero growth or like degrowth, right? There's a lot of debate in the climate
Yeah,
space about that. The same thing about your health. Like, at what a cost do you want to keep growing your money and your job title that will like adversely impact your overall health, like your mental, relationship health, physical health, right? All these things that you never calculate into your cost benefit analysis of keep growing your dollars.
yeah. Um, I love that. I love like the degrowth concept. So so now like put your coaching hat on, right? So I'm sure you
Yeah.
talk to tons of folks who like indicate they either want to take a break or don't know that they haven't been able to vocalize they want a break, but you think they need one. Like, what's your advice for folks looking to take extended leave, looking to take a sabbatical?
Do you want me to advise or you want me to coach?
Good question. Maybe you can do a little bit of both. One way and one the other way.
Right. So I think let's do the coaching hat, right? Like, I think let's you be a dummy client, right? So let's say DJ, yeah, I don't know yet, and then I will ask him or I'll ask you, why do you not know yet? What's the underlying emotions there that prevented you from permitting yourself to take that break,
Yeah.
right? Now let's say they say, "Oh, I'm afraid I will not have money. I'm afraid my parents will judge me. My spouse will pressure me to," and blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And then I usually take an approach of like, okay, that's what in your mind, but what does your body tell you? Somatically, what does it feel? Do you feel like you're so like depleted and exhausted that you can't even function anymore? Then your body is not lying. Like you have
Yeah.
to take that route of extended break. Like you tried that 2 weeks vacation, it didn't work because your mind is still preoccupied with the email and Slack channels that all your coworkers ping you, right? And what is it that will allow you to be completely recharged when you come back to work if the 2 weeks vacation didn't work for you,
Yeah.
right? So I think I think go into the more empowering mode because I don't think everyone needs an extended break. Like not many people are overachievers or like suffer a lot of trauma that I had or like a lot of my friends had who have done this.
Yeah.
But most people who have done this extensively because they probably live a very tough life or like they're just born with hypersensitivity. The nervous system is so malleable and it's so sensitive that they got so overstimulated by the things that happen in life, even on an average, right? So they need that extensive period to rewire that nervous system. And then if that's still not resonant, then I will ask, okay, um, what sentences do you want to hear from your support system that will give you permission to do this extended break?
Mm.
And then you can coach them, hey, I need this from you if you love me. I remember talking to my parents about this, and then in my culture men always have to keep working, right? And also they were so shocked, like this MBA from Stanford, MPP from Oxford suddenly take a year off in Bali. Is he becoming a hippie? Like, is he losing himself, right? And I told my mom, did you know that I never took a break even when I was 3? Even when I was in 18, I got scholarship to Wesleyan. I filled that summer break with studying English at Yale. And after that, I studied Chinese. And after that, I did an internship.
Yeah.
Between my job and Oxford, I didn't take a break. I went to master and then I did another master's and then I do internship. Like, I never stopped. And I think this is my time to permit myself with the money that I earn to tell people, go fuck yourself if you criticize my break because you got triggered by my ability to take a break, and let me take care and nourish myself that I've been neglecting for a while. Right? I think it comes from a spring of self-love as well. Like how much do you love yourself that you think you deserve this? Because otherwise you will break down and burn out,
Yeah.
right? I think those support system matter so much. And then suddenly my mom become like supportive. I'm like, yeah, my son, he's been so overachieving. And suddenly she's just like becoming because I bring in this issue of like, what if I got to the hospital because I keep working? And
Yeah.
and then any parents doesn't want their children to be hospitalized because of work, right? I mean, you've seen even in Japan, karoshi, people die out of overwork. Like, do you want
Yeah.
to die because of work? You'll be replaced tomorrow. Like, that's tragedy, right? And that's will be probably my advice to these people. Like, listen to the body and tap into your support system to give what you need to permit yourself.
And so now you're talking to someone that's taking a sabbatical, maybe coach hat off, like sabbatical taker hat on. Like
Mhm.
what would you advise them to do? How would you advise them to think about it? Whether it's like how long or what kind of activities to do, what things not to do.
Right. I personally think heal the core part of yourself that made you do this um, sabbatical. If you
Yeah.
haven't addressed that, you'll probably repeat this anytime soon because you already
Mm,
know how good the taste of is of taking sabbatical, and then yet you haven't really allowed yourself to do the work. Because I think sabbatical, yes, it's exploration and discovering yourself, exploring your hobbies, but it is also the time to renew and rejuvenate. And sometimes that means healing yourself, healing
yeah.
physically, healing mentally, healing emotionally, healing spiritually, healing psychologically. Because we are holistic, right? We are multifaceted person. We're just not one body that does number crunching or slide making or writing a Google Doc, right? We are everything, and we have so many different part of ourselves that have been neglected for a while. If you don't attend to those things that have been screaming for to you, that make you have to do this sabbatical, you probably have to repeat that again. And after that, you do calculation. Okay, how much can I afford to do the extended sabbatical, right? And then what else do I feel I haven't really explored? Right, really use this extension because there's no one else asking you, hey DJ, come back, we need you. This is your this is your gift to yourself, but that gift has to also be worth it, right?
What would you
Yeah.
do on the, I love this like healing mindset. Like what would you do to heal? What would you recommend? Like what are some for folks who are like, I don't know
um
how to heal. Like I think I'll go climb a mountain.
right. I mean, you'd mentioned yourself that you went through different temples, right, to visit in Japan.
Yeah.
um Mine, I mean, I started with psychedelics, right? I started with plant medicines, and there's a lot of burgeoning, booming explosion of psychedelic
Yeah.
retreats now in Central America, in Spain, Portugal, in the US, even like some states already legalize it. If you dare do psychedelics and then do a proper integration with a coach or like with a
Mm,
therapist,
hmm.
there's many now done in Jamaica and in Costa Rica. It's like a hotbed of that. In Brazil and Peru, in Amsterdam, also very legal to do that. Like, but do it intentionally and professionally. Like, pay attention to the set and the setting. You can read Michael
Yeah.
Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, and then go that route. And Tim Ferriss will talk about it openly. And then, if not, explore through somatic experiencing or somatic based psychology. I personally think people who need to do sabbatical cannot do CBT. Talk therapy is cheap. It's not
Mm,
gonna go. It's gonna bypass your body. When
mm,
sabbatical's needs is arising, you need to tap into the body wisdom and intelligence. So do something that is body based, right?
yeah.
There's also TRE, traumatic release exercise. And then mine was breath work because psychedelic is not legal in Indonesia, so I pursue breath work. And
Mm,
breath work allowed me to do a lot of body work on my body and my mind. And I remember I coming in the training, I didn't breathe from my belly because I was a hyperachiever, always overthinking and always anxious. So my breath is only limited to my chest. It never goes down to my belly and my groin area. It never really breathed there. It was kind of like spooky. I was like, holy shit, like I've been functioning like this without breathing any part of my body. And and then yeah, I think those are the two things that I would highly recommend. And find a support circle. Like, I remember I reconnected with my two of my classmates at Stanford who were doing the same. That
mm,
one year they were quitting their Goldman Sachs and BCG job, and then we were just having a weekly call, like consistently for 1 year and a half. Every week we had a call.
that's awesome.
Like, that was really supportive, and that was really helping all of us to make these bold decisions to do whatever we do now.
Yeah.
um, and and at that time I was already ahead 6 months. They were just starting, and that my experience gave them some kind of like boost as well to this finally decide to leave their corporate job, right?
Mm.
And then give them some time to really do the sabbatical. I think those are the thing, community, modalities, right? That's what you want for healing.
Awesome. Cool. I knew this was going to be a great conversation, and I'm glad I got to know kind of even more in depth, especially hear a little bit more about your family history. That the family of origin stuff was one of the biggest surprises for me when we
Mhm.
dug into the research and just really seeing why you make the choices, like why anyone makes the choices they do, and how like this inertia of the people around them, whether it's their family or their peers or whatever, kind of leads them to a place where they look back and oftentimes they haven't felt a lot of agency in making the decisions that they did. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
cool. Well, I'm looking forward to continuing to collaborate, and really
Sure.
appreciate you sharing the story.
My pleasure, DJ. Yes. Yeah, I'm happy to deep dive with you on that one.
Awesome. Okay. Talk soon, Jordan.
Cool. Thank you, DJ. Take care.